For most of human history, education was fundamentally local. Students learned in schools within their communities. Universities primarily served the regions in which they were located. Knowledge moved slowly, carried through books, correspondence, and occasional scholarly exchange. Even in the 20th century, the idea of learning from an instructor halfway around the world was unusual. But in the last 2 decades, something remarkable has begun to happen. A student in Brazil can watch a lecture from a professor at MIT. A learner in Nigeria can participate in an online programming course developed in California. A research team might include scholars working simultaneously in Singapore, Germany, and Canada. Education is increasingly happening across borders. And as digital technologies connect institutions and learners around the world, the traditional boundaries of the classroom begin to blur, which raises an interesting question. What happens to education systems when the classroom itself becomes global? Welcome back to the EdTech Curio Cabinet. Hi again, I'm Christina, the Curio Steward. Throughout this season of the EdTech Curio Cabinet, we've been exploring how education systems shape the way knowledge is taught and learned. We began by looking at global mathematics performance and the cultural expectations that shape STEM learning. We explored the powerful influence of examination systems in structuring educational opportunity. We examined Nordic approaches to trust-based education, the design of engineering pipelines, and the enduring role of liberal education within technical disciplines. And in the previous episode, we looked at how universities serve as anchors within innovation ecosystems. Each of these curios reflects how societies organize knowledge. But today's curiosity reflects something slightly different: the increasing interconnectedness of education systems themselves. As always, we'll explore this curiosity through 4 lenses: the artifact, the phenomenon we're examining; the pattern, what history and comparison reveal; the paradox, the unexpected insight hiding within the story; and the signal, what this might tell us about the future of learning. One of the most visible early signals of the global classroom emerged about 15 years ago with the rise of large-scale online learning platforms. Platforms such as Coursera and edX introduced the idea of massive open online courses, or MOOCs. In Season 1, we explored this moment in detail: how MOOCs captured global attention and how they challenged long-held assumptions about access, scale, and the role of universities. At the time, the conversation was largely about disruption. Could universities be replaced? Would education become fully global and digital? That framing, in hindsight, was only part of the story, because what followed was not replacement, but integration. What MOOCs revealed was not just that content could scale. They revealed that classrooms themselves could be designed for global participation. And over time, that idea has evolved. Today, global learning is not defined solely by large-scale courses. It is supported by a growing ecosystem of systems and structures that make global participation possible. Platforms that support asynchronous and synchronous learning across time zones. Tools that enable collaboration between learners who may never meet in person. Content designed to be culturally and contextually adaptable. And institutional models that recognize learning happening beyond a single campus. In other words, the global classroom is no longer just a course format. It is becoming a system. Historically, knowledge has always moved through networks. Ideas spread through journals, correspondence, and academic communities. Scholars built relationships that extended far beyond their institutions. What has changed is not the existence of these networks, but their structure and intentionality. Digital technologies have transformed knowledge networks into learning systems. Today, students don't just access content, they participate in distributed learning environments. Researchers don't just collaborate, they co-create knowledge in shared digital spaces. Institutions don't just publish, they contribute to interconnected ecosystems of resources. This is an important shift. In the past, networks were often informal and loosely connected. Now, they are increasingly designed. Platforms define how learners interact. Institutions define how learning is recognized. Technologies define how knowledge is accessed and shared. This connects directly to what we explored in the previous episode on universities and the innovation economy. Just as innovation emerges from structured networks of collaboration, learning environments are now being intentionally designed as part of a broader education ecosystem. The global classroom is, by design, expansive. It aims to serve learners across geographies, cultures, languages, and educational backgrounds. But learning itself remains deeply local. Students bring their own context. They bring prior knowledge, cultural expectations, and their own constraints on time, access, and support. This creates a fundamental paradox. We can design systems for global reach, but learning still happens within local realities. A course that scales to thousands of learners must still be meaningful to each individual learner. A platform that connects across borders must still account for differences in language, infrastructure, and educational norms. So the challenge is not simply scale, it's relevance. How do we design global learning systems that remain flexible enough to adapt to local contexts? One of the clearest signals emerging today is that global classrooms are no longer accidental byproducts of technology. They are being intentionally designed. We are seeing courses built with multilingual support from the outset, modular content that can be adapted across institutions, collaborative environments that connect learners from different regions, and credentialing models that recognize learning across borders. And universities are evolving in their role. They are not simply delivering content to a global audience. They are participating in networks where content is shared, where learning is distributed, and where credentials may increasingly be portable. This represents a shift from broadcasting education to orchestrating learning ecosystems. And it builds on, but is distinct from, the MOOC movement. Where MOOCs emphasize scale, today's global classroom emphasizes structure, how learning is supported, how learning is recognized, how it connects across systems. Education has always been about transmitting knowledge across generations. But in an interconnected world, it is increasingly about connecting learners across contexts. The global classroom is not just about access to content. It is about participation in systems of learning that extend beyond any single institution. And that raises more questions. Who designs these systems? Whose knowledge is represented? How is learning recognized across borders? The answers to those questions will shape not just the reach of education, but its equity and effectiveness. Education technology evolves quickly. New platforms, new systems, new possibilities emerging all the time. But the deeper patterns, how we structure learning, how we support it, how we make it meaningful, change much more slowly. That's why we keep the cabinet open. Thanks for exploring the EdTech Curio Cabinet.